Hello. This week I'm going to be reading Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. It's my first Darcy Coates thriller. I don't normally read like winter, resort, ski trip, lodge thrillers or whatever that subgenre is, but I was in Colorado visiting my friend and I really wanted to get a book from one of the local bookstores, and this was the only one that really caught my eye that day, and I thought it was cool because this story is actually set around a little bit around the Rocky Mountains. It says 8 strangers, 1 killer, nowhere left to run. When Krista joins a tour group heading deep into the Rocky Mountains, she's hopeful this will be her chance to put the ghosts of her past to rest. But when a bitterly cold storm sweeps the region, the small group is forced to take shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin. There's more to the synopsis, but you know, you can just go check it out for yourself. So I do feel optimistic, even though it's warmer now. It's literally April, so I feel like this is like the worst month to try to read this, but I was just in the mood for like a quick, fast thriller, so that's why I'm picking this up. And then the other book my hands are full. The other book I'm picking up is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Obviously, this is an highly anticipated read for a lot of people, because Leigh Bardugo, I was not expecting a historical fiction from her since she's kind of wrapping up the Ninth House series, I guess, but I am intrigued. It says, fate can be changed, curses can be broken. In a shabby house on a shabby street in the capital of Madrid, Luisa, I think is how you say it, Cotado uses scraps of magic to get through her days of endless toil as a scullion, but when her scheming mistress discovers a lump of a servant cowering in the kitchen is actually hiding a talent for a little miracle, she demands Luisa use those gifts to better the family's social position. Again, that's just the first part of the synopsis. Yeah, I heard that Leigh Bardugo wrote this as a kind of inspiration for her family history. She says she has ancestors that did have to flee the Spanish Inquisition, so I'm very curious how much of that history plays out. I don't think it's like autobiographical or semi-biographical or anything like that. So it sounds really fun in a way, I don't know, to explore that time period and see how the author herself spins this story with magic. And I have no doubt that I will enjoy this because her writing always delivers. So yeah, those are the 2 books I am reading this week, and I hopefully get a 4 or 5 star out of them because I haven't really got a 4 or 5 star book in a while. So yeah, I will update you once I have an update. All right. Back with a reading update. I am halfway finished with Dead of Winter. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. It's finally getting interesting because I think the body count is up to 4 now. You know, someone's killing off somebody. I still haven't guessed what's going on because I just have no, like, I just can't fathom the motive of, you know, 8 strangers or how many people there were going to a secluded cabin in the mountains, and then someone just randomly is killing them off one by one. I do feel like there is an unreliable narrator situation. I don't really trust the person telling the story for some reason. I don't know, the way she's just thinking and talking is just too analytical. Like, I just feel like she's like 2 or 3 steps ahead of everyone. So I'm just like, is she the one doing this whole time? And then I'm also kind of theorizing that maybe one of the people who have died may not actually have died. Maybe they faked their death and are continuing to kill people off. I think she brought her boyfriend with her on this trip, and part of me just wants to just go ahead and guess that her boyfriend's behind all this, because literally 95% of thrillers, it's always a man that is the killer, like almost always. So I don't know if there is some other off-page character we don't know about, but mostly I'm just not like able to guess right now because I don't really understand the motive. But the author is doing a pretty good job at setting the atmosphere. Even though I don't normally go for snowy, winter, secluded wilderness thrillers, I actually normally avoid thrillers like that. It's just not my jam. But this is pretty good actually, and even though it has 78 chapters, 78, I'm flying through it because the chapters are really, really short, and I'm also listening to the audiobook, and the audiobook's not too long. So yeah, it's pretty fast paced. I'm not really bored right now. I am kind of just more like tired of being in the internal monologue of the main character, which is just gonna be a thing with first person point of view anyway. Maybe it would have been interesting with other points of view because there's 78 chapters. I don't know. So yeah, I have some guesses, but I don't know how wrong I am. But yeah, it's a really quick, easy read. I actually like the writing style for my first Darcy Coates, so maybe I'll read her other stuff. We'll see. And then the other book I've been reading this week, as I've already said, is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I'm about halfway through. Let's see, I think I'm liking it so far. I say I think because I don't normally read historical fiction. I'm very picky about my historical fiction, and a lot of times I feel like historical fiction can be bogged down by the info dumps and all the details, and I actually feel like the author has been like seamlessly weaving in the history into the story without me feeling overwhelmed. So I personally think this is really accessible, and a lot of times, since I'm not a history buff of any kind, historical fiction kind of bores me usually, but I'm not bored at all, and I feel like I'm understanding the world building pretty well. I probably will have to go do some research on the Spanish Inquisition to kind of get more context for the world. I mean, not because I have to, just because I'm like curious. But yeah, so how's the story so far? I really like their writing. The character is really interesting. I think her name is pronounced Lucia? No, it's not Louisa, it's Lucia. I don't know. It's a Spanish name, so it's kind of hard for me to pronounce it. Even though I looked it up, and I still am having trouble. Lucia. Okay, I cannot keep doing this. But then there is this other character. I'm also not gonna pronounce the name because I cannot pronounce Spanish names right now, even though I looked it up and tried to learn. But I'm just gonna refer to that character as the Familiar because that is what he calls himself. But yeah, the dynamic between the Familiar and Lucia is very interesting. It actually reminds me of the dynamic between the Darkling and Elena in the Shadow and Bone series. I know that in that series the Darkling was really romanticized, and there was a like weird power dynamic and an age difference, you know. So that is not what is going on here. This is a little bit more adult and mature, though at times Lucia feels like she's naive just because she's worked as a servant all her life, but at the same time she's very sharp. I am getting the vibe that the Familiar character has a thing for Lucia. Like, he is like kind of thirsting for Lucia a lot. Let's see. And yeah, another similar dynamic with Darkling and Elena is the familiar character is like 1,000 years old, maybe only 500,000, I don't remember. I don't think it explicitly states, but it is implied that he's been around quite a while, just like Darkling is. But that is where the similarities end. It is not a copy-paste situation at all. I just think it's more of a on-brand for Leigh Bardugo thing and less of a like she's literally just doing the same thing. It's completely different. What else? World building, characters, writing, plot. The plot. The plot. Well, it is historical fiction, and it is more character driven in a lot of ways. So it's really slow burn. So this is not going to be, so far this does not feel like the fast paced type of stuff we're used to, like with Shadow and Bone, Six of Crows. I feel like its pacing is more similar to Ninth House. Like, again, the books are completely different. She's not writing the same thing, but I think the pacing and the slow burn is similar. So if you're looking for something super high stakes and quick pace and fast twist turns every corner, you're not gonna, I have not experienced that, but I don't mind. Like I said, normally historical fiction really bores me, but the pacing of this and the introduction to this world is still intriguing to me. But yeah, the first half was like very like, I don't know, slow burn, but we're just finally in the middle getting to some interesting parts. I don't know if Louisa feels the same about the familiar character right now. I don't know if it'll be reciprocated or anything like that, so that will be interesting. So we'll see, I guess, what the outcome will end up being. I will be back to continue letting you know how this is going. I almost spoiled the story. But anyways, at the end when the killer reveals themselves, there's sort of like this whole mustache twirling villain aspect where it's borderline comical, because the villain is doing that thing where they do this 2-page long speech of how they did it and why they did it, and they're kind of laughing at the main character and just like, ha ha ha, you never knew this, without spoiling it, you didn't figure it out, and like taunting the main character. So that kind of was kind of cheesy a little bit, but I will say that the method of the killings were really interesting and really grisly. And I'm like thinking about it now, like most thrillers don't do unique style killings. Like most thriller authors don't do that. Usually it's off page or it already happened and the main character is trying to figure it out, investigate, so you don't see it happening. And if you do see it happen, it's just like, oh, you know, the killer stabbed some people and that's it. And there's not a lot of thought and creativity in how the killings happen. I'm sure I've read a few, but in this case, definitely creative killings, which is really weird to say, obviously. But so that definitely held my interest and that made it more of a unique experience. Yeah, so this is my first Darcy Coates, like I said, and I think I'm going to read maybe a couple more books by this author. I felt like the writing style was really distinct, because when you read enough thriller, sometimes everything starts to blend together and you can't really distinguish thriller authors sometimes, because to be honest, there's not that much new you can read with thrillers. After a while, everyone starts kind of using the same tropes. So even though there were some tropes that most thriller authors use, I do feel like for the most part this was pretty unique. So I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. And then the next book I am going to talk about is The Familiar. I did not finish it, and I don't know if I will. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I am tempted to DNF even though I only have 80 pages left. I'm about 75% in, and right at the moment that I thought it was gonna pick up and get more exciting and have more surprises and twists, it got kind of anticlimactic. So I don't know, I don't feel compelled to keep going. I heard in some or read in some reviews that there is some surprises at the end, or a surprise, or it kind of comes out of nowhere, but so far I don't want to keep going. Like, I'm getting a little bored now, and it's not because it's slower burn, and it's not because of historical fiction, it's just the way it's set up is just making me not feel invested. You know, I thought I felt like there's gonna be some big thing riding on the tournament that the main character has to do, but as soon as that happens, it like kind of starts to slow down again, and so I'm not feeling the anticipation or suspense to keep going, if that makes sense. So I'm probably going to finish it, but I need a break because I've been reading it for almost a week now, so maybe I just need to like start something else and then come back to this book, and maybe it'll be interesting to me again. But overall, like, the writing's well done. I do like the main character. She's pretty strong-willed, which is good. I like that. There was a bit of spice. There was a bit of spice. I wish there was more spice. Like, I kind of wish this ended up being a romance historical fiction, but the romance is like very, very, very like small. So don't expect a super spicy historical fiction romance like Outlander or anything, though now I'm kind of wishing it had become that, just so that I felt more invested. Yeah, I will, if I finish this, I will come back to you all with a final update. I finally collected my thoughts on The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I didn't end up DNFing it because I still had maybe 40 to 45 pages left, so I went ahead and finished it. I did take some notes so that I can remember what issues I had. So yeah, let's just go right into it. By the way, I need to preface this by saying this book was not terrible. It just wasn't for me. First, the characters. There are characters that were introduced that I didn't feel like ended up serving a purpose at all. Like, there are maybe 3 to 4 core characters that were part of Louisa's story. I hope I'm saying that right. But then there was these other characters that were introduced and were barely, there were only like 2 pages worth of them being there, so that was, I didn't really get that. There is moments earlier in the book where Louisa is said to be ambitious, but then by the end she doesn't really put up a fight. Like, she kind of has this internal thought of, maybe I'm more ambitious than I think, maybe I want more from my life, maybe I'm stronger than I think, and then I don't feel like there was a lot of character development in that area. There was actually one chapter, or not one chapter, one line that was very, very heavy on the foreshadowing. Like, there's something I thought was going to happen based on these lines, and then nothing ever ends up happening. Like, it's almost implied at the beginning when Louisa leaves to be a part of this tournament or competition or whatever, that they might not ever come back to, no one will ever come back to their home again, including what was her name? Victoria? Victor? I don't even remember her name. Her mistress and her mistress's husband. I thought that's what they meant, but then a couple of them do end up going back, and the way they imply it was when there was a scene where they're deciding whether or not they should cut Louisa's hair, and then they say then they'll regret later that they didn't cut her hair. But I don't think that ever ends up being her, like, Louisa's hair doesn't even end up being an important plot point in the story by the end. I don't know. If you're confused, I'm confused too. Then lastly, I felt like the magic system wasn't as complex as I was expecting. I knew not to compare it to the author's other books. That's fine. I don't need the author to write the same style of story every time, but I did think with the magic in it that it would have more of an important role in the story. And the magic system is as light as if you were reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue or The Night Circus, both of which have undertones of, what's the word I'm looking for, historical fiction, even though it's like loosely historical fiction. And then the magic system is not like, you know, high fantasy levels of complex, which is fine. I just was not expecting the magic system to be that in the background. So yeah, so again, I don't think this is a bad book, because there's lots of people who love Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and there's lots of people who love The Night Circus. So I think if you don't mind a magic system that is that fantasy light, then I think you would like The Familiar. That being said, both The Night Circus and Invisible Life of Addie LaRue had a romance arc in it, and I think in both of those the romance arc was stronger than this. If this was meant to be a romance, The Familiar was meant to be a romance, I was not convinced at all. So if it was only meant to be subtle romance, I wish the author had gone all the way in with the romance, and then maybe I would have had a better experience. Lastly, this is more or less a huge spoiler, though I don't think it really is. So what I'm about to say is going to be a spoiler. But I will try to timestamp where I stop saying anything, but I really don't think it gives that much away. Okay, I'm about to tell you. 3, 2, 1. The ending is literally exactly like Ruin and Rising, but if Elena ended up with a Darkling instead of Mal. Exactly. Like at the end of Ruin and Rising, if I can remember correctly, Elena fakes her death. I think Elena fakes both her and Mal's death, I don't remember. And then they go live off happily ever after, and they are kind of immortalized through the saints worshipping Elena, I think. It's been a long time. Yeah, that's more or less what happened. Louisa and the Familiar character, they fake their deaths, and then they live on forever. I'm not exactly sure if Louisa also ends up becoming immortal, but I know the Familiar is still immortal because Louisa keeps bringing him back to life because he keeps dying or something. It's very vague. Like, it's a very vague explanation / magic system. So yeah, that was basically the same ending as Ruin and Rising. So yeah, now the spoiler part is over. But yeah, so I've been kind of between a 2 to 3 star, and I feel like 2 stars is too harsh, but 2 stars does not necessarily mean bad, just means disappointing. And then 3 stars just means satisfying. I overall liked it, but then I did not really like the book. I did like the writing. There's so many parts that I tabbed that I can go back to the lines and think, wow, that was a beautiful piece of writing, but overall it just didn't impact me. I didn't feel the feels here. That does not mean it's a bad book. I do think people who like soft historical fiction with a soft magic system would appreciate this more, but I was expecting something a little bit more high stakes based on the way the story was set up, and I was not expecting so many characters to be introduced only to not be utilized. Let's see. And then honestly, the plot was a little underwhelming and a bit anticlimactic, which again, I don't mind slow burn, quieter stories that aren't like in your face, larger than life, whatever. Like I can read those types of stories, but I just felt like there was so much like anticipation built up for this tournament, for her character being in danger, that it just was strange that it then suddenly goes in the direction of this romance that wasn't really built up. Like, if it was meant to be a romance, I wish it was just that from the beginning, and then we have this interaction between Louisa and the Familiar the whole time. But it seemed to focus on one thing and then become a different thing, so I'm not really sure. Oh, and one last thing. One thing that also didn't make sense to me was the character that the book is named after barely makes an appearance. Like, he's there and then not there. Very subtle, like very little to do with the actual plot or the character. Honestly, if the character was completely removed from the entire book, it would still be the same story. I promise you. I promise. It didn't, like, why was it called The Familiar when that character himself felt so felt like a background character? And that's kind of disappointing because that character was really interesting and I could have read an entire book about that character alone. Maybe if we had a backstory for Louisa and The Familiar, like more in depth, not like a page-long quick summary of why he's the Familiar, I might have been more convinced and really felt these characters, but I didn't. So it was just weird that this wasn't as in depth as I thought. But some people just like to read I don't want to say simple because it wasn't simple. There was a lot of important context for the history and the character and being Jewish during the Inquisition, so it wasn't a simple story. But some people just like a nice, you know, not high stakes magic system type of story, which is fine. But yeah, I'm just gonna end my long monologue here. But yeah, I was disappointed, so I'm probably gonna give it 2.5 stars, which that's okay because it's not like I've loved every single book by Leigh Bardugo anyway. But there are definitely people who are gonna enjoy this story. But I wouldn't go into it expecting this larger in life cinematic story, which is fine. Like I said before, if the romance had been a bigger role in the story, then I could have accepted that and been still invested, but then that wasn't even really utilized either, so it's just like, you know. But yeah, I'm gonna end this vlog here, and friendly reminder that my 2.5 stars can be someone's 5 stars. Doesn't mean this is the worst book ever. I just didn't go in with the right expectations, I guess. Thank you so much for watching this vlog. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!